These days there seems to be a fairly regular occurrence of major AAA games that really build the hype and end up falling flat on their arse. Obviously, just last year we had Cyberpunk, which was an absolute disaster and is still not really 100% there. This year, of course, the honour went to Battlefield 2042. Now, there aren't many games that have crapped the bed as massively as Battlefield 2042 managed to do just last year. Now, when the 2042 was first announced, the reception was overwhelmingly positive. It was the first Battlefield game in 3 years, and the near future setting sort of brought back that quintessential Battlefield Modern Warfare type of shooter. The COD killer was well and truly here, according to some people on Twitter who clearly don't know what they're talking about. But honestly, who cared about Call of Duty? Battlefield was back, bigger and better. If only that were true, eh? When Battlefield 2042 was announced, I was ecstatic. I've been waiting for a return to what I personally see as proper Battlefield. Now, obviously, that is very opinionated, but for me, Battlefield 2042 was sort of off that Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Bad Company sort of esque. Just by looking at the trailer, I was really buzzing for this. A gritty, destructive, modern, all-out warfare multiplayer experience, and oh my god, tornadoes! Now, when it comes to a proper Battlefield, what I mean by proper Battlefield, there was something that was so special about playing Battlefield games and being able to, for example, blow up walls to enter a building as opposed to finding a door and using the mundane, boring way of getting into a building. Just blow up the wall. Genius. The thrill of playing Siege of Shanghai on Battlefield 4 when the building comes raining down, that to me was pure Battlefield. It was just brilliant at the time, and certainly on the fact you can't remember Battlefield 4 came out on PS3 and Xbox 360, and the fact that you still had that sort of, Levolution as it was known back in the day, the fact that you could still have that sort of destruction. Obviously it wasn't as good as on the new consoles or PC, but the fact they even managed that on PS3 and Xbox 360 was just mind-boggling to me at the time. Obviously I wasn't as technical back then, I was younger, but to me at the time that was unbelievable, and it sort of comes back to bite them on the arse when you look at the laziness of Battlefield 2042. We'll get to that in a bit. Now, you can probably tell from what I've already said that Battlefield 4 was the last time I truly loved a Battlefield title, and I also enjoyed the Bad Company series and Battlefield 3 before that. And that isn't to disparage the Battlefield titles that came in between 4 and now. Battlefield 1 and 5 were both good games. Battlefield 5 eventually was a good game. Hardline was, well, I don't really know what to say about that one. It was just a bit weird. There's nothing really more to add, is there? Now, my main issue with 1 and 5 in particular was that the settings of the games did not, for me, match what Battlefield had become. World War 1 and 2 settings is not what we had come accustomed to from the Battlefield series. Yes, I am aware that Battlefield started out in World War 2, and that isn't what I mean, don't be. The setting to me just didn't really translate well to the destruction and chaos that Battlefield had become with Battlefield 4 and 3 and Bad Company and whatnot. And therefore, when news of 2042 came about, I was like a kid in a newly opened sweet shop. But sadly, trailers and marketing material can be oh so deceiving. The cold reality of that is within 3 months or so you have a petition to refund all those that had the misfortune of buying the game. A player base that has fallen off a cliff and a reputation of one of the great first-person shooter franchises in tatters. Player limits. Something that I don't remember anyone really moaning about initially, but one of the new features, if that is the word to use, I'm not sure it is the word to use, one of them was new player limit on the new consoles and PC, a player limit on the large-scale modes of 128 players. Now, initially, this isn't something that particularly bothered me. I mean, you never know, maybe it would be good. Well, maybe it would, if the game was optimised for it. Now, I'm no game developer, coder, programmer, I may be no expert at all, but for me, if you do something drastic with player numbers, make sure your game can actually handle it. 128 players wasn't something that was really asked for. 64 players was plenty for the modes such as Russian Conquest. Maps weren't made for it. Games struggled to run on it, and bots would fill up half the spots in the lobbies. It was a silly, unnecessary move that impacted the game only in a negative fashion, and has since almost been killed off entirely by the introduction of 64-player modes. Who saw that coming, eh? Then there is the destruction, or the lack of, I should say. Now, as I already said in the intro part of this video, I loved the idea of, I use the example of just having a building in front of you and you can just blow it to smithereens. I always used to run around with a grenade launcher and just do that for my own amusement. Maybe I'm an anarchist, I don't know. But I love the destruction element. For me, it became synonymous with Battlefield. The destruction, the levolution. Frostbite, the Frostbite engine in its prime, produced some spectacular gameplay that made Battlefield truly stand out from Call of Duty. And yet, where was it in 2042? Yes, there are weather events, more on them shortly. But the scale of destruction is so minimal in comparison to previous games. Worse still, there have been suggestions that factors including the 128 players are as to why destruction is so scaled down, or levolution as it was, isn't really a feature in the game. As it would seem that having both the 128 players and the destruction elements would cause problems for the game, which is a bit ironic considering the game had problems anyway. Now, those weather events. Yes, great. Really brilliant. It seems to be some sort of cop-out to me, the weather events, that add some level of disruption to the game. Now you can't just, have a skyscraper fall on you. Sure, it looks cool in the trailer, and for 1 or 2 games, it's something quite exciting, it's a bit different, and, we're all like children, aren't we? We go towards it. In the beta, I did mess about with that a lot, even though the beta was a mess, so you sort of had to make your own fun anyway. But, after those 1 or 2 games, it becomes repetitive, it becomes a bit of a gimmick, and it is quickly forgetful. Or even worse, if anything, it becomes annoying. And that sort of affects the game quite negatively if there is something that can happen in any game that is a bit of an annoyance. Now, if you could tell, I was getting a bit more irate going through that because those factors sort of do get to me. The fact that you had the thing that Battlefield was so good at, and you've sort of taken it away to add some gimmicks and a player count that is unrealistic to be achieved in most lobbies. That's just the surface. There's literally so much that I could have put more time into. Like, for example, the Hazard Zone, the mode that was kind of there to be a Battle Royale alternative that wasn't Battle Royale, but it was kind of like it, but it wasn't. It was sort of like those people that hate on something that's popular, just sort of be different and be edgy and be like, I'm so special. That was sort of what EA and DICE did with Hazard Zone, in my opinion. They sort of did something that was different just to be a bit out there. And don't get me wrong, having difference is a good thing, and Battle Royale is a bit played out at this point, but Hazard Zone really did. Right, before I go on with this, I should say this next one, it's not really a Battlefield problem specifically, and it's probably something that doesn't bother people as much, but a lack of a campaign mode rubs me the wrong way, quite frankly. It just does not feel right to me, especially in a first-person shooter. Now, it is especially a shame with Battlefield 2042 because they actually did go into a decent backstory. When the game was announced, you could have a look and there were loads of information about how the world was what it was and gave everyone context of where the game was, and it would be quite an interesting story that would be based in this. I accept, like I say, this is not just my opinion. It may not even be a majority opinion. I don't know. Let me know if it is. And Battlefield 2042 is not going to be the first and won't be the last to ditch the single player. Specialists, haven't brought up specialists yet. The use of specialists, as opposed to the classic class system that worked so well, just did not need to be changed. Like, why did they change it? Well, there's actually quite an obvious reason why they didn't change it. It's because the classic system doesn't really fit into the money vacuum that is season passes. Specialists allow for cosmetics, which tend to be the least Battlefield thing out there, by the way. Like, yes, a gritty, realistic war simulator, essentially. And what are they going to do? They're going to do the Call of Duty thing where you've got bloody colourful people running all over the place. It just doesn't. It is not meant to be a clown show. It's meant to be all-out warfare. But of course, with Call of Duty's success, it was inevitable that EA are going to want a slice of the pie, but it just does not work. Their mind was so narrow-minded on the money that they didn't really think about making it work, which is quite a big issue. And finally, I mean, again, there's so many points, but finally, the lack of a fucking scoreboard of all things. A first-person shooter without a scoreboard. Who thinks of that? I really want to be in that meeting where they thought, you know what would save us a bit of time? Let's not have a scoreboard. It's not like it's a game where the fucking score matters at all, is it? Jesus Christ. It's those types of decisions that really just... I mean, we're only in part 1. We've got more to go. We've got more to fucking go. Now, the community of a major game franchise can, on quite a few occasions, be difficult to deal with. They're absolutely massive by what they are, and they're full of opinions from all over, which can sometimes mean arseholes show up. So I do have a degree of sympathy for those that are put in the firing line of dealing with everyone, especially one of the EA games. I feel like, I mean, you got all the sport games, you got the things like FIFA, and with Battlefield and this mess, I mean, it's probably a tough job for those interns that are siving through Twitter, for example, and are having to read all this. And I do, like I said, I do have a degree of sympathy. However, that does not mean you have a right to marginalise the community. The communication of what has been going on has largely been shocking. Why do they think the player base has gone absolutely down the shitter? A roadmap to the future has only recently been shared. Until then, there was barely anything. Nothing on fixes, nothing on patches, nada. Apparently, they were all on their holidays, which was convenient. Like, if they're all on their holidays, like, now it's obvious that you can't say that employees can't have time off. They're obviously well within their rights to have time off over the holiday period. That is not what anyone with any sanity would say. But all it would have taken is one piece of communication before closing shop for Christmas, detailing what they plan to do afterwards, and that would at least give a bit of a bit of leeway. At least people who are still holding out hope for this game would have that little crumb of comfort. Yes, the game would be a mess over Christmas, but hopefully in the new year things will be sorted. But no, they just sort of quietly go off into the sunset. So it's things like that it just seems so simple to me. Yet marketing departments, and this isn't just a gaming issue, they seem to always identify open goals to miss them. That's what marketing basically seems to do. Now we're into mid-February, and DICE have at least somewhat suggested change will come. We'll get to that, what has been said in a bit. But is it enough? I mean, the damage already seems done. The player numbers are hemorrhaging, with Battlefield 5 nearly having as many, sometimes even more over the last few weeks. More players than 2042. The game that is already on life support needs something massive, but what will that bring? So, what now? Well, we might be getting a scoreboard in March. Yay! Isn't that great? Season 1 is now slated for summer, and this comes to my final major point. Season 1 coming in summer would suggest to me the game is nowhere near in a position that it should have been released in. Delay your fucking games if they're not ready. My God, who in the gaming industry has to be bloody told this? Yes, I know there was a delay to Battlefield, however it clearly wasn't close to enough. EA still desperately needed that game to come out in the fourth quarter of 2021, no matter what. Revenue comes first before ensuring a good product. It is EA after all. The delay to Season 1 just makes this so clear to me. Call of Duty, for example, occasionally has delayed seasons, but Call of Duty has a month between release and Season 1. Those are the two comparisons that everyone wants to compare. So that sort of shows it to me. Call of Duty has a month. 2042 is set to have 7 to 8 months in between the release and Season 1. All the while, they tidy up their game so it is in a release state. Games should not release until they're ready. Is the flack and absolute flatline in player numbers really worth the insurance of revenue coming in before Christmas? Evidently, yes it is. 2, which released way before it should have, and now it is completely in the mud. All because they want that dollar. So, back to the initial question of this part. What now? Well, as hard as it is to believe, the game is still not completely dead. That does sound ridiculous, considering it is so bad that there are petitions out there to get those who have the game refunded, now way over 100,000. It is easy to forget Now, Battlefield 5 had a rocky launch, for example, as did the fellow DICE game Battlefront 2. Both had a cheeky little relaunch, both improved drastically. Granted, neither had such an appalling time of it like 2042. And another little positive, and I've been saying this as a positive, is bizarre, but Battlefield games have a good history of launching in a bit of a state. Now, I said at the start that Battlefield 4 was one of my favourites, but Battlefield 4 was plagued with issues when it first released. It was an absolute mess of a game. Once you got into a lobby that worked, it was bloody fun, but it was a mess. Battlefield games do have a history of doing this, and as I said, Battlefield 5 had to have a relaunch. So they have experience of cocking up the release stage of their game and then sort of pulling it back. Obviously, Battlefield 4 was at least a good game, had a campaign, and it was against COD Ghosts, which, yeah, was a bit shit, so is it really a comparison? Don't know. But they both Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 4, and I believe Battlefield 1 did, someone would have to, I can't quite remember, they all had terrible times in certain ways, and 2042 could learn from those. Communication must improve. Keep people in the loop of what is going on. That way players can stay involved and potentially interested. The less you tell people, the more they leave in droves, and that is why the player numbers have dropped so massively. If you don't tell them what's going on, they're just not going to stay in it. Even if it doesn't mean anything short term, at least everyone would be a bit clearer on the future direction. Listen to what the players want. They all just want what's best. Well, 90% of them know what's best. Focus on 64 players, bin off Hazard Zone. Let's be honest, no one will miss it, and if you are one of the few that will, I'm sorry. Right now, it's a bit of a case of wait and see. However, at this moment in time, Battlefield 2042 is nothing but an absolute failure, and it is so sad to see. Now that brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe for more. Please be sure to leave your views on Battlefield in the comments below, whether you agreed, disagreed, or simply think that I'm a twat. Go ahead and leave a comment. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.